In 1757, Robert Clive beat an army of 50,000 men with 3,000. He did it by paying their commanding general to stand on a hill and watch. It's the most famous bribe in military history. It made him one of the richest men alive, and it taught every officer under him exactly how power works. 19 years later, they made the anniversary of that day their national holiday, not as a tribute, as a warning. Every June, in a building in Calcutta, a few hundred elected representatives file in to open the parliamentary session. Before any business happens, the speaker reads a document out loud. It takes 4 minutes. It's a royal charter granted by Elizabeth I in 1600, licensing a group of London merchants to go and buy pepper. They read it every year because it is still, legally, the founding document of the country. The pepper company never stopped being the government. Nobody in the room thinks this is strange. That's not our world. Ours missed it by 4 months and a broken mast. In 1772, a British company went bankrupt. Parliament had to bail it out. That company owned a private army of over 100,000 men, twice the size of the actual British army. It also, as a side detail, owned India. Nobody in London thought this was odd. A trading company running a subcontinent answering to shareholders instead of a king was just business as usual. The problem is that somebody in Bengal noticed. The East India Company began as a group of London merchants who wanted a monopoly on pepper. That was the entire ambition. Pepper. By 1757, it had artillery. That year, at a mango grove near a village called Plassey, a company officer named Robert Clive faced down the ruler of Bengal, a young man named Siraj-ud-Dowlah. Clive had about 3,000 men. Siraj had about 50,000. Clive won anyway, because he had already paid Siraj's own commanding general, Mir Jafar, to stand in a field and do nothing. You understand that our entire plan relies on the enemy's second-in-command not turning up. Correct. And if he turns up, then we've had a very short career. Is there a second plan? There's a horse. The horse is the second plan. Mir Jafar did not turn up. He sat on a hill with 15,000 men and watched. Clive installed him as ruler of Bengal, a puppet who owed the company everything, and spent his reign discovering what that meant. You already knew that's how this ends. So did every officer standing behind him. That's the part nobody thought about. Clive won Bengal in front of an audience, a few thousand men who watched their commander demonstrate in public and in detail that you don't need to beat an army if you can pay the man in charge of it to be somewhere else. 19 years is a long time to think about a lesson like that. Bengal was one of the richest regions on earth. Its textile exports alone made up a serious share of world trade. The company now controlled tax collection across all of it. Clive went home in 1760 with a personal fortune of about £234,000. A skilled tradesman in London made £40 a year. Clive had earned 6,000 working lifetimes in 3 years. He bought a seat in Parliament, an Irish title, and, according to his critics, most of the government. Then he went back in 1765 because £250,000 apparently wasn't the finish line, and negotiated the Diwani, the legal right to collect taxes across Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa on behalf of the Mughal emperor, who by now was a ceremonial figure on a pension, paid to stay indoors and not have opinions. A trading company was the tax authority for 20 million people. Nobody designed this, nobody voted for it, it simply accumulated, the way damp does. Here's where it goes wrong, and it goes wrong in an extremely boring way, which is usually how these things go wrong. The company's own staff were robbing it. Officials collected the official tax, then an unofficial one, then went home. There was no meaningful audit because the auditors were 8 months away. Oh, and they were also shareholders in the company. Then, in 1770, Bengal had a famine. It killed something in the region of 10 million people, and it was made significantly worse by company administrators who kept collecting revenue at full rates throughout, because the alternative was reporting a bad quarter. It's the worst thing anyone in this story does, and nobody faced any consequence for it, because the men they answered to were on the other side of the planet being told the numbers looked excellent. Which brings us to the numbers. In London, the share price reflected none of this, because nobody had told the shareholders anything. The company kept paying a healthy dividend it couldn't afford, out of money it didn't have, on the strength of a province it had just helped starve. In 1772, this arrangement did what these arrangements do. The company asked the British government for an emergency loan of £1.4 million to keep the lights on. This is the part that genuinely annoyed Parliament. So the company is bankrupt. Yes, but it governs Bengal. Yes. And it has an army larger than ours. Also yes. And it would like some money. From us. That is correct. And if we decline, then the largest army in Asia stops being paid, and we find out what it does next. Parliament passed the Regulating Act of 1773, a new post of Governor General, filled by Warren Hastings, and a system of crown oversight designed by men who had never been to India and weren't planning to be, ever. The directors loathed it. They'd spent a century and a half building something that answered to nobody but its shareholders, and now a minister was going to read their post. The officers in Bengal loathed it more for a simpler reason. The bailout came with cuts. The cuts came out of the army budget. The army budget was their wages. Clive, meanwhile, was having the worst year of his life. Parliament opened an inquiry into precisely how he'd made all that money, and General John Burgoyne stood up in the Commons and accused him of looting a province. Clive defended himself with a line so audacious people still quote it. He explained that he had walked through the treasury of a defeated Nawab, surrounded by gold and open chests, and taken comparatively little. By God, Mr. Chairman. At this moment, I stand astonished at my own moderation. The Commons cleared him of the specific charges, then passed a resolution noting he had broadly abused his power, the parliamentary equivalent of not guilty, but we all know. Clive went home. He was in chronic pain, dependent on opium, publicly humiliated by the political class he'd personally bought his way into. In November 1774, at 49, he took his own life. That's the real timeline. Now, 2 ships. In our history, the news reached Calcutta in a sensible order. The dispatch announcing the pay cuts arrived alongside the covering letter explaining they were temporary, that London understood the difficulty, that nobody's regiment was being disbanded. 2 documents, same packet, same ship. Here, they go on different ships. The pay cut order sails on a vessel with a clean run. The explanation sails on one that loses its foremast in the Mozambique Channel and limps into Calcutta 4 months late. For 4 months, every officer in the Bengal Army holds a document saying their pay is cut and nothing at all saying why or for how long or whether they still have jobs. What they do have is the London newspapers, which travel faster than official mail because merchants pay more for speed than governments do. And the London newspapers are full of Parliament, calling the company a nest of thieves. So the men who conquered Bengal spend a third of a year reading in print that their employer is bankrupt, disgraced, and being nationalized, and reading nothing whatsoever about themselves. They draw the obvious conclusion. It's the wrong conclusion. Given the available evidence, it's also a completely reasonable one. By March 1775, 3 regiments at Monger have stopped taking orders. Not violently. They keep drilling, keep guarding, and simply decline to acknowledge anything arriving with a company seal. Hastings sends an officer to ask what they want. He comes back with a list of 4 items, every one about wages. They're not rebelling, they're invoicing. Can we pay it? No. Can we arrest them? With what army? Our army. Yes, that's the difficulty. Here's the first thing nobody expects. They don't send for Clive. They convene their own colonels and try to settle it through paperwork for 11 weeks because they aren't revolutionaries. They're middle-aged professionals who want to be paid. It's London that ruins it. The directors, reading Hastings' dispatch 8 months after he wrote it, order the ringleaders shipped home for trial. That order lands in October 1775, by which point the dispute has nearly settled. Unsettling it takes a week. Second thing nobody expects. Clive, alive in this timeline, because the letters begging him back arrived while he still had something to come back to, lands at Calcutta in November and immediately tries to shut the whole thing down. Not from loyalty, from arithmetic. Every ship you own was built in a British yard. Every buyer for every bale in those warehouses sits at the far end of a sea lane the Royal Navy patrols. You have an army? Armies do not sell textiles. So what would you have us do? Wait, take the deal. Be boring for 18 months. And they look at the man who won Bengal by paying a general to stand still, and they decline to be boring. You didn't wait at Plassey. Plassey was 3,000 men in one afternoon, and this is 100,000 men and a continent. You taught us the sum. We've only done it larger. Clive loses the argument. That's the point. He isn't leading this, he's been overtaken by it. On the 23rd of June, 1776, the anniversary of Plassey, chosen deliberately, the officers of the Bengal presidency declare they no longer take direction from London. They keep the name, they keep the flag. They stop sending the money and stop opening the post. Clive signs it, because the alternative is being the only man in Bengal without an army, and he is the one person alive who knows exactly what that's worth. Then he sits down and works out what the date actually means, because Plassey wasn't a battle. Plassey was a purchase. Plassey was the day Robert Clive proved that the man commanding an army can always be bought away from the man who thinks he owns it. His officers have just made that their national holiday. They chose the date to honor you, Hastings says when the news reaches him. They chose the date, Clive says, to remind me. By the time this reaches London, 3 things are true at once. The Royal Navy will be ordered to close the Bay of Bengal, and the shareholders demanding it include half of Parliament, because the money that just stopped arriving was theirs. The Marathas will notice that the company's western frontier is now guarded by an army in the middle of an argument with itself, and the French who never actually left India, will begin being extremely helpful to everybody. Clive has 100,000 soldiers, the richest province on Earth, no navy, no allies, and no legal existence. He also has a number in the back of his mind. He knows precisely what it cost to buy Mir Jafar in 1757, and he knows Warren Hastings is sitting 80 miles away with the Crown's authority, an excellent memory, and a checkbook. Should we try to arrest him? With what army, exactly? The one currently refusing to sail, sir? No. I think we try something Clive taught us.